Aisha Coleman walked through the doors of Brookridge High, hoping to survive her senior year in silence. The whispers started immediately. New girl, scholarship student, doesn't belong. When Brittany Hale, the principal's daughter with a cruel smile and a phone always recording, decided Aisha would be her next victim, she thought it would be easy. Just another quiet girl to humiliate in front of the whole school. But Brittany didn't know about the black belt hanging in Aisha's bedroom, the years of discipline taught by her father, or the strength that came from refusing to break no matter how hard they pushed. Brookridge High was about to learn that the girl they thought was weak was actually the strongest person in the building. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Brookridge High School, casting long shadows across the polished hallway floors. Aisha Coleman stood at the entrance, her backpack slung over one shoulder, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. 16 years old and starting mid-semester at a new school was never easy. But Aisha had learned to keep her head high and her emotions steady. She wore a simple denim jacket over a white t-shirt, her hair pulled back in neat braids that fell just past her shoulders. As she walked down the main corridor, whispers started to ripple through the clusters of students leaning against locker. Eyes followed her movements, some curious, others dismissive. Aisha kept walking, her face calm and composed, even as she felt the weight of every stare. "Who's that?" someone muttered. "New girl," another voice answered. "Probably another scholarship kid." The words weren't meant to be quiet. They carried just enough volume to make sure she heard. Aisha's jaw tightened slightly, but she didn't turn around. She'd heard worse before. Near the center of the hallway, a group of girls stood in a perfect semicircle, their designer bags hanging from their wrists like accessories of authority. At the center was Brittany Hale, blonde hair styled in loose waves, wearing a cheerleading jacket that seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. Her eyes locked onto Aisha immediately, a smile playing at the corners of her lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Look at that," Brittany said loud enough for her friends to hear. "Fresh meat." The girls around her giggled, and Brittany tilted her head, examining Aisha like she was evaluating a piece of clothing that didn't quite fit the store she was in. Standing beside Brittany was Chad Miller, a tall, broad-shouldered athlete with sandy brown hair and a red varsity jacket that announced his status to anyone within eyesight. He leaned against the lockers with the kind of casual arrogance that came from never having been told no. Chad smirked as Aisha passed. "New charity case?" he whispered to Brittany. Just loud enough for Aisha to catch. Brittany stifled a laugh, pulling out her phone and angling it subtly toward Aisha as she walked by. Aisha noticed but said nothing. She'd learned a long time ago that reacting only gave bullies what they wanted. The morning classes passed in a blur of introductions and syllabi. Aisha sat in the back of each room, answering questions politely when called on, but otherwise keeping to herself. By lunchtime, her stomach was knotted with tension, not from hunger, but from the anticipation of navigating the social minefield that was the cafeteria. When she pushed through the double doors into the lunchroom, the divide was immediately clear. On one side of the room, students dressed in expensive clothes sat at tables near the windows, their lunches consisting of sushi boxes and smoothies from trendy cafes. On the other side, kids with worn backpacks and tired eyes sat with trays from the cafeteria line, talking quietly among themselves. Aisha grabbed a tray and scanned the room, looking for a neutral spot. She found an empty table near the middle, hoping to avoid drawing attention to either side. She'd barely sat down when she heard footsteps approaching. Chad appeared beside her table, holding a juice bottle in one hand. He looked down at her with that same smirk from the hallway. "You lost?" he asked. "No," Aisha said quietly. "Just eating lunch." Funny, Chad said. This doesn't really seem like your section. Before Aisha could respond, Chad's hand slipped, and the juice bottle tipped over, spilling bright orange liquid all over her tray. The cafeteria fell silent as students turned to watch. Brittany appeared beside Chad, her phone already out and recording. "Oops," Chad said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "My bad." Laughter erupted from the tables nearby. Aisha stared down at her ruined lunch, juice dripping onto her jeans, her hands clenched into fists under the table. But when she looked up, her face was perfectly calm. She stood slowly, picked up her tray, and walked directly toward Chad. The laughter faltered. For a moment, tension crackled in the air. Then Aisha held the tray out toward him. "You dropped this," she said evenly. Chad blinked, caught off guard. Aisha turned and walked away, heading toward the trash bin to dump the tray. The cafeteria was completely silent now. Even Brittany had lowered her phone, unsure of what had just happened. From across the room, a teacher watched the entire exchange. Mr. Lopez, the history teacher, had been standing near the cafeteria entrance, and his eyes followed Aisha as she left. There was something about the way she'd handled herself, the quiet dignity in her refusal to engage, that caught his attention. Later that day, he pulled up her student file on his computer. "Coleman, Aisha," he read aloud to himself. "Scholarship student. Discipline-based sports." He leaned back in his chair, curious. Discipline-based sports could mean a lot of things. But combined with the composure he'd just witnessed, Mr. Lopez had a feeling there was more to this girl than met the eye. After school, Aisha stood at her locker, organizing her books for the evening. The hallways had mostly emptied out, and the quiet was a relief after the chaos of the day. She was just closing her locker when she heard footsteps behind her. "Hey." She turned to find Chad leaning against the lockers, his arms crossed. He wasn't smiling anymore. "You think you're better than us?" he asked. Aisha didn't answer. She stepped to the side, trying to move past him, but Chad shifted his body to block her path. "I asked you a question," he said. "I heard you," Aisha replied. "I just don't have an answer you'd like." She tried to step around him again, but he moved once more, this time closer. Aisha's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Her weight settled evenly on both feet, her shoulders squared, her breathing slow and controlled. Chad didn't notice, but anyone trained in martial arts would have recognized the stance immediately. Before the situation could escalate further, a voice echoed down the hallway. "Poor girl alert!" Brittany appeared at the end of the corridor, flanked by two of her friends. She walked toward them with exaggerated confidence, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor. When she reached Aisha, she didn't hesitate. She shoved Aisha hard in the shoulder. Aisha stumbled back a step but didn't fall. She steadied herself quickly, her hands still at her sides. Brittany's friends had their phones out now, recording everything. "What's wrong?" Brittany taunted. "Can't even fight back?" Aisha met her eyes but said nothing. The silence seemed to irritate Brittany more than any insult could have. "Pathetic," Brittany muttered, turning away. As the group walked off, laughing and replaying the video on their phones, Aisha noticed someone else in the hallway. Principal Hale, a tall man in a gray suit, stood near the office doors. He'd been watching the entire exchange. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Then he turned and walked into his office without a word. Aisha exhaled slowly, her hands trembling slightly now that she was alone. Before she could gather her things, she felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Mr. Jenkins, the school janitor, standing beside her. He was an older black man with kind eyes and a soft smile. "You okay, kid?" he asked. Aisha nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine." Mr. Jenkins bent down and picked up one of her books that had fallen during the shove. He handed it to her carefully. "Keep your guard up," he said quietly. Life's a dojo, too. Aisha looked at him, surprised. You know martial arts? He smiled. I know enough to recognize someone who does. That evening, Aisha sat at the small kitchen table in her apartment, her mother, Diane Coleman, stirring a pot of stew on the stove. Diane was a nurse who worked long shifts at the local hospital, but she always made time to cook dinner when she was home. How was your first day? Diane asked. Fine, Aisha said, not looking up from her homework. Diane turned off the stove and sat down across from her daughter. She reached out and gently tilted Aisha's chin up so their eyes met. Baby, I know that look, Diane said. What happened? Aisha hesitated, then sighed. Just some kids being kids. Nothing I can't handle. You've fought harder battles before, Diane said softly. Don't lose your balance over loud mouths. Aisha nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. I know, Mama. After dinner, Aisha retreated to her room. It was small but tidy, with a narrow bed against one wall and a desk cluttered with textbooks and notebooks. On a shelf above her bed sat a row of trophies, their gold and silver surfaces dulled with dust. She ran her fingers over one of them, remembering. Later that night, Aisha knelt on a worn mat in the corner of her room. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, centering herself. Behind her, mounted on the wall in simple black frames, were several certificates. The largest one read, State Karate Champion 2023. The video had already spread by morning. Aisha arrived at school to find clusters of students huddled around phones, laughing as they watched the clip of Brittany shoving her in the hallway. Brittany had captioned it, New girl can't fight back. Comments flooded in. Most were cruel, mocking Aisha for not standing up for herself. A few were different, though, quieter voices questioning why no one had stepped in to help. One of those voices belonged to Mia Jennings, a slim girl with dark brown skin and paint-stained fingers who spent most of her time in the art room. Mia had watched the video 3 times, and each time she felt a knot of anger tighten in her chest. In Mr. Lopez's classroom that morning, Aisha sat in her usual spot in the back. Mr. Lopez was discussing the civil rights movement, his voice passionate as he described acts of peaceful resistance. When the bell rang and students filed out, he called Aisha over. I wanted to talk to you about something, he said, leaning against his desk. The school is starting a self-defense workshop for students. I think it might be something you'd be interested in. Aisha shifted her weight, her expression carefully neutral. I appreciate it, Mr. Lopez, but I'm not interested. Are you sure? He pressed gently. I saw what happened yesterday. You have every right to protect yourself. I'm done proving myself, Aisha said quietly. Thank you, though. She left before he could say anything else. Mr. Lopez watched her go, puzzled by her response. Most students would have jumped at the chance, especially after being bullied, but Aisha seemed almost allergic to the idea. Meanwhile, Chad and his friends had gathered in the school's weight room during lunch. They called themselves the Crew, a self-appointed group of athletes and popular kids who ruled the social hierarchy. Today, they were scrolling through videos on Chad's phone, laughing at clips they'd posted of scholarship students. Charity Challenge, Chad announced, showing a video of a kid being tripped in the cafeteria. Look at this one. Classic. Brittany sat on a bench nearby, applying lip gloss. You should post more. My followers eat this stuff up. One of the guys, a linebacker named Tyler Barnes, laughed. Dude, remember when we locked that kid in the equipment closet? Epic, Chad said, grinning. We should do something with the new girl again. She's too easy. Later that afternoon, Aisha opened her locker to find garbage stuffed inside. Wrappers, banana peels, used napkins, all crammed into the small space. The smell hit her immediately, and students in the hallway began to laugh as they noticed. Aisha stared at the mess for a moment, her face unreadable. Then she calmly began pulling the garbage out, piece by piece, and placing it in a nearby trash bin. She didn't look at anyone. She didn't cry. She just cleaned. Brittany appeared beside her, arms crossed. Not even gonna cry? Aisha closed her locker, picked up her backpack, and walked away without a word. Mia had been watching from down the hall. She couldn't take it anymore. She marched up to Brittany, her hands balled into fists. "What is wrong with you?" Mia demanded. Brittany turned, looking Mia up and down with amusement. "Oh, look. The art freak has an opinion. She hasn't done anything to you," Mia said. "Why are you doing this?" Brittany stepped closer, her smile sharp. "Because I can. And if you don't like it, why don't you go join her loser dojo, or whatever?" Mia's eyes widened. "What dojo?" Brittany laughed. "You didn't know? Do your research, art freak." That evening, Mia sat in the public library, scrolling through old newspapers on the microfiche machine. She'd heard Brittany's comment and couldn't let it go. After nearly an hour of searching, she found it, a small article from 2 years ago about the state martial arts finals. There, in the center of a grainy photo, was Aisha Coleman, holding a trophy and wearing a black belt. "State karate champion," Mia whispered, reading the headline. Oh my God. Across town, Aisha was at a small, run-down community dojo on the east side. The building was old, with cracked windows and a faded sign that read, Harris Dojo. Inside, the mats were worn but clean, and the air smelled of sweat and discipline. Sensei Harris, a stocky black man in his 60s with a shaved head and a Marine Corps tattoo on his forearm, watched Aisha practice her katas. She moved with precision, each strike controlled, each stance perfect. But there was something missing, a fire that used to burn in her movements. "Stop," Sensei Harris said. Aisha froze mid-punch. "You're holding back," he said, walking toward her. "You're afraid of becoming what they are." Aisha lowered her fists. "I don't want to hurt anyone. Control is strength," Sensei Harris said, "but fear is weakness. Right now, you're letting fear control you, not discipline." Aisha looked down at her hands. "What if I lose control?" "Then you were never in control to begin with," he replied. "Trust your training." The next day at school, word had spread about the upcoming pep rally on Friday. It was supposed to be a charity event, a mock talent versus challenge show where students could perform or compete in friendly games. But Chad had other plans. During lunch, he stood up on a table in the cafeteria, his voice booming across the room. "Hey everyone, I have an announcement." The cafeteria quieted down, all eyes on him. "For the pep rally, I think we should have some real entertainment," Chad said, grinning. "Let's have Aisha show us her skills. I heard she's some kind of karate master or something." Laughter erupted. Students turned to look at Aisha, who sat frozen at her table. Brittany stood beside Chad, filming the whole thing. "What do you say, Aisha?" Chad called out. "Give us a show?" Aisha didn't respond. She stood, grabbed her tray, and walked out of the cafeteria, the laughter following her like a shadow. In the hallway, Chad cornered her once again. This time, Brittany was with him, along with Tyler and another guy from the football team. "You can't just ignore us," Chad said, his tone darker now. Aisha tried to step around them, but Chad pushed her shoulder hard. She stumbled but caught herself quickly. Her eyes flashed with something dangerous, something that had been buried deep. For a moment, her body shifted into a fighting stance, weight balanced, fists ready. Then she remembered Sensei Harris's words. Control is strength. She forced herself to relax, letting her hands fall to her sides. Chad laughed. "That's what I thought," he said. "You're all talk." That evening, Aisha sat in Principal Hale's office, her mother beside her. Diane had taken time off work after Aisha finally told her what had been happening. "Principal Hale," Diane said, her voice firm. "My daughter has been harassed repeatedly, and nothing has been done about it. Principal Hale, a middle-aged white man with thinning hair and a practiced smile, leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Coleman, I understand your concern," he said smoothly. "But from what I've seen, this seems like typical teenage drama. Kids can be rough sometimes, but it's all part of growing up." "Typical?" Diane's voice rose. "They destroyed her locker. They assaulted her in the hallway." "Assaulted is a strong word," Principal Hale said. "Chad Miller is an exemplary student. He's on track for a scholarship. I find it hard to believe he would intentionally harm anyone." Aisha stared at the floor, her jaw clenched. "So you're saying my daughter is lying?" Diane demanded. "I'm saying," Principal Hale said carefully, "that sometimes students misunderstand social dynamics. Perhaps Aisha needs more time to adjust." Diane stood abruptly. "Come on, baby. We're done here." They left the office, and Aisha could feel her mother's anger radiating like heat. But beneath her mother's fury, Aisha felt something else rising within herself. A quiet, burning resolve. That night, alone in her room, Aisha stood in front of her mirror. She reached for her black belt, running her fingers over the worn fabric. She tied it around her waist slowly, deliberately, staring at her reflection. "Never again," she whispered. For the first time since arriving at Brookridge High, the fire in her eyes returned. The announcement came during Tuesday morning's assembly. Principal Hale stood at the podium in the gymnasium, his voice echoing through the space as students sat on the bleachers half listening. "This Friday, we'll be hosting our annual Talent vs. Challenge charity event," he announced. "It's a wonderful opportunity for students to showcase their abilities while raising money for a good cause." Brittany sat in the front row with her cheerleading squad, already scrolling through her phone. Beside her, Chad leaned back with his arms crossed, that familiar smirk playing on his lips. When the principal finished speaking and stepped down, Chad immediately stood up. "Hey, Principal Hale," Chad called out, his voice carrying across the gym. "I have a suggestion for the talent show." Principal Hale paused, turning back with a practiced smile. "Of course, Chad. What is it?" "Well, I heard we have a new student who's apparently really talented in martial arts," Chad said, glancing around the gym until his eyes landed on Aisha, who sat near the back with Mia. "Maybe Aisha could show us her skills. You know, for charity." The gym erupted in a mixture of cheers and mocking laughter. Students craned their necks to look at Aisha, who remained perfectly still, her face calm, but her hands gripping the edge of the bleacher seat. Principal Hale hesitated for just a moment before his smile widened. "That sounds like a wonderful idea, Chad. Aisha, what do you say? Would you like to participate?" All eyes were on her now. The pressure felt like a physical weight pressing down on her shoulders. Aisha knew what this was. Another setup, another chance for them to humiliate her. But she also knew that saying no would only make things worse. "I'll think about it," she said quietly. "Great," Chad said before she could change her mind. "We're all looking forward to it." As students filed out of the gymnasium, Mia grabbed Aisha's arm, pulling her aside into an empty hallway. "You're not actually going to do it, are you?" Mia asked, her eyes wide with concern. "I don't know yet," Aisha admitted. "They're going to try to embarrass you," Mia said. "That's what this is. You know that, right?" "I know," Aisha replied. She looked at Mia for a long moment, then took a deep breath. "But maybe that's exactly why I should do it." "What do you mean?" "I'm not doing it for them," Aisha said, her voice growing stronger. "I'm doing it so they can't do it to anyone else." Mia studied her friend's face, seeing something new there, a determination that hadn't been present before. "Okay," she said softly. "Then I'm with you. Whatever happens." That evening, Aisha sat in her room staring at an old photograph on her desk. It showed her as a young girl, maybe 9 years old, standing beside her father in his military uniform. They were both in fighting stances, her small fists raised next to his larger ones. Her father, Marcus Coleman, had taught her everything she knew about martial arts before he deployed overseas. She remembered the way he would correct her stance, his voice patient but firm. "Balance, baby girl. Everything starts with balance. If you lose your center, you lose everything." He had left when she was 12, right after her first major tournament. The plan was for him to return after his tour, but one deployment turned into 2, then 3. Phone calls became less frequent. Visits stopped altogether. Eventually, her mother stopped talking about him, and Aisha had learned to lock away those memories in a place where they couldn't hurt her. But now, sitting in the dim light of her room, those memories came flooding back. The training sessions in their garage, the tournaments where he would stand in the crowd, his face beaming with pride. The way he would always tell her, "You're not fighting your opponent, you're mastering yourself." Aisha pulled out a box from under her bed and opened it. Inside were her old competition photos, medals, and her worn training gloves. She hadn't looked at these in months, maybe longer. She picked up one of the photos from the state championship, staring at the girl in the image who looked so confident, so sure of herself. "Where did you go?" she whispered to her younger self. Over the next few days, the memories kept coming. They would hit her at random moments, in class, walking down the hallway, eating lunch. Flashbacks of her father teaching her a new kata in their backyard, the sun setting behind them. The smell of the old dojo where she used to train, a mix of sweat and worn leather. The weight of the gold medal around her neck after she won the state championship, her father lifting her onto his shoulders as the crowd cheered. In the present, Aisha returned to training with renewed focus. Each evening after school, she would go to Sensei Harris's dojo and work through her forms. The movements came back to her muscle memory, blocks, strikes, kicks, each one executed with increasing precision. Sensei Harris watched her carefully, noting the change in her energy. "You're finding your center again," he observed one evening. "I'm trying," Aisha said, breathing hard after completing a particularly difficult sequence. "The question is, are you doing this for the right reasons?" he asked. "Revenge is a poison, Aisha. It'll corrupt everything you've learned." "It's not about revenge," she said, meeting his eyes. "It's about showing them, showing everyone, that they don't get to define me." Sensei Harris nodded slowly. "Huh, good. Remember that when you're up there. The moment you forget why you're really fighting, you've already lost." Meanwhile, at Brittany's house, she and Chad sat in her bedroom, planning their strategy for the pep rally. Brittany's room was enormous, decorated in whites and golds, with a walk-in closet visible through an open door. "Okay, so here's what we do," Brittany said, her fingers flying across her phone screen. "Right when she starts her demonstration, I'll trip her. It'll look like an accident." Chad laughed. "Perfect. And I'll have Tyler ready with his phone to catch everything. Then we post it immediately," Brittany continued, her eyes gleaming, "with the caption, 'The Karate Queen Falls.' It'll go viral in minutes." "Your dad's not going to have a problem with this?" Chad asked. Brittany waved her hand dismissively. "Please. My dad doesn't care what I do as long as it doesn't hurt his reputation. And this is just entertainment." What they didn't know was that Mia had been documenting everything. Every hateful comment, every video they posted, every cruel joke. She had screenshots of all of it. She was building a case, though she wasn't sure yet what she would do with the evidence. On Thursday evening, the night before the pep rally, Aisha sat at the kitchen table with her mother. Diane had just gotten home from a double shift at the hospital, her scrubs wrinkled and her face showing the exhaustion of a 12-hour day. But when she saw the look on her daughter's face, she immediately sat down. "Talk to me, baby," Diane said. "I'm scared. Aisha admitted. What if I mess up? What if they're right about me? Diane reached across the table and took her daughter's hands. Aisha Coleman, you listen to me. Strength isn't about fighting first. It's about knowing when to finish it. Tomorrow, you walk into that gym with your head high. You show them what discipline looks like, and you remember that no matter what happens, you've already won by refusing to become what they are. Aisha nodded, tears threatening to spill over. I wish Dad was here. Diane's expression softened with sadness. I know, baby. I know. That night, Sensei Harris made an unexpected visit to their apartment. Diane had called him earlier, worried about Aisha. He sat in their small living room, his presence somehow making the space feel safer. I saw the videos online, Sensei Harris said. The bullying. Aisha looked down at her hands. I'm sorry. I should have handled it better. No, he said firmly. You handled it exactly right. You showed restraint. But tomorrow, things might be different. If you must fight, and I mean if they force your hand, do it clean. Let them expose themselves. Don't give them any excuse to paint you as the aggressor. What if I can't control it? Aisha asked. What if I hurt someone? Sensei Harris leaned forward. Your training isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting yourself and others. Trust what you know. Trust your discipline. And most importantly, trust that you're strong enough to walk away if you need to. Friday morning arrived with a gray sky and the distant rumble of thunder. The gymnasium had been transformed overnight, with banners hanging from the rafters and a makeshift stage at one end. Bleachers on both sides were already filling with students by the time Aisha arrived. She stood backstage, wearing her white gi and her black belt, her heart pounding in her chest. Through a gap in the curtain, she could see Chad and his friends setting up their act. They were dressed in cheap karate costumes from a party store, complete with headbands and fake wooden swords. They were rehearsing a mock martial arts routine, deliberately making it look clumsy and ridiculous. Ladies and gentlemen, Tyler announced in an exaggerated voice, the ancient art of Kung Fu Panda. They stumbled around the stage, making exaggerated chopping motions and fake fighting sounds. Students in the bleachers were already laughing. Brittany stood on the sidelines, recording everything, her smile wide and cruel. Mia found Aisha backstage. You okay? No, Aisha said honestly. But I'm doing it anyway. When Chad's group finished their performance to wild applause and laughter, Principal Hale took the microphone. That was entertaining, he said with a forced smile. And now, we have a special treat. One of our newest students has agreed to show us some real martial arts. Please welcome Aisha Coleman. The applause was scattered and hesitant. As Aisha walked onto the stage, she could hear whispers and snickers from the crowd. Her eyes scanned the bleachers until they landed on Sensei Harris, who stood at the back, his arms crossed and his expression calm. He nodded once, and that simple gesture gave her the strength to continue. Chad stood near the front of the stage, that smirk still on his face. Ready to show us what you got? He called out. Aisha took her position at the center of the stage. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began. She started with a basic kata, her movements fluid and controlled. Each strike was precise, each stance balanced. The laughter in the gymnasium began to fade as students realized they were watching something real. This wasn't a joke. This was years of training, discipline, and mastery on display. Then Chad made his move. He stepped onto the stage, bowing mockingly. Let me help you demonstrate, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Aisha opened her eyes, and in that instant, she knew what was coming. Chad lunged forward, grabbing for her arm. Cameras around the gym immediately focused on them, recording every second. But Aisha was ready. She sidestepped smoothly, redirecting his momentum with a simple shift of her weight. Chad's own force carried him forward, and he stumbled, nearly falling. Gasps echoed through the gym. Aisha didn't counterattack. She simply let go and stepped back, her hands returning to a neutral position. Chad's face flushed red with embarrassment. He tried again, this time more aggressively, reaching for her shoulder. Aisha deflected him effortlessly, using his momentum against him once more. This time he did fall, landing on his hands and knees on the stage. The gymnasium erupted in chaos. Some students were cheering, others were booing. Brittany was screaming something from the sidelines, but her voice was lost in the noise. Principal Hale rushed onto the stage. "That's enough," he shouted. "Everyone calm down." But it was too late. The moment had been captured from a dozen different angles. Within minutes, the videos were uploading to social media. This time, though, the narrative was different. The clips clearly showed Chad attacking first, and Aisha simply defending herself with grace and control. The caption that went viral wasn't Brittany's. It was from a student named Jason Williams, a quiet kid who sat in the scholarship section of the cafeteria. "Girl dodges jock's attack like a pro." This is what real discipline looks like. By lunchtime, the video had thousands of shares. News outlets began picking it up. Local sports blogs wrote about it. But not everyone saw it as a victory. Some comments praised Aisha for her restraint. Others, influenced by Brittany's family connections, twisted the story, claiming she had been aggressive and threatening. The weekend brought an explosion of attention that Aisha wasn't prepared for. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, messages from people she'd never met, friend requests from strangers, news outlets requesting interviews. She turned it off and spent Saturday in her room, trying to process everything that had happened. Monday morning, she walked into school to find Principal Hale waiting for her at the entrance. "Ms. Coleman," he said, his voice clipped. "My office. Now." Aisha followed him down the hallway, aware of every eye watching her. When they reached his office, her mother was already there, still in her nurse's scrubs from the night shift. Diane's expression was thunderous. "Mrs. Coleman," Principal Hale said, taking his seat behind the desk, "I'm afraid I have no choice but to suspend Aisha for aggressive behavior during Friday's assembly." "Excuse me?" Diane stood up, her voice sharp. "My daughter was defending herself. The videos show that clearly." "The videos show a physical altercation on school property," Principal Hale countered. "Regardless of who initiated it, Aisha used martial arts techniques against another student. That constitutes assault. Chad attacked her first." Diane slammed her hand on the desk. "Where's his suspension?" "Chad has been reprimanded," Principal Hale said smoothly. "But he didn't have the training to cause serious harm. Aisha does. That makes her the greater liability." Aisha sat silently, listening to them argue. She'd expected this. From the moment Principal Hale had walked past her being bullied in the hallway weeks ago, she'd known the Spochid's system wasn't designed to protect her. "This is discrimination," Diane said, her voice shaking with anger. "You're punishing my daughter for being black, for being on scholarship, and for defending herself." "Mrs. Coleman, I resent that accusation," Principal Hale said, his face reddening. "This has nothing to do with race or class. This is about school safety." "Then why is Chad still walking these halls?" Diane demanded. "Why is your daughter still posting videos mocking my child online?" Principal Hale's jaw tightened. "Brittany's behavior will be addressed privately, as will Chad's. But my decision regarding Aisha stands. She's suspended for 1 week." They left the office, Diane's arm around Aisha's shoulders. As they walked through the parking lot, Diane turned to her daughter. "I'm so sorry, baby," she said. "This isn't right." "I know," Aisha replied quietly. "But at least everyone saw the truth." Back inside the school, the student body was divided. Half the students idolized Aisha, calling her a hero for standing up to bullies. Posters appeared on lockers with slogans like "Stand with Aisha" and "Justice for Coleman." The scholarship kids who had been quiet and invisible for so long suddenly found their voices. But the other half, led by Brittany and the wealthy students, sided with Chad. They created their own campaign, claiming Aisha was dangerous and violent. Teachers were caught in the middle, whispering nervously about bad optics and legal liability. In the teacher's lounge, Mr. Lopez sat with several colleagues watching the news coverage on someone's laptop. "This is ridiculous, he said. "That girl showed more restraint than most adults would have. But she did use force," Ms. Peterson, the math teacher, argued. "What if she'd hurt Chad?" "She didn't hurt him," Mr. Lopez countered. "That's the point. She defended herself without causing injury. That's the definition of appropriate force." "The principal's made his decision," Ms. Peterson said. "We should respect it." Mr. Lopez shook his head. "Sometimes respecting authority means calling it out when it's wrong." That afternoon, he drafted a letter to the school board detailing the harassment Aisha had endured and Principal Hale's failure to address it. He included links to all the videos, both the ones showing the bullying and the ones from the pep rally. Then he attached a copy of the school's anti-bullying policy, highlighting the sections that had been violated. Before sending it, he hesitated. This could cost him his job. But when he thought about Aisha's quiet dignity in the face of cruelty, he knew he couldn't stay silent. He hit send. Meanwhile, Mia was dealing with her own crisis. Brittany had found out that Mia was collecting evidence against her. On Tuesday afternoon, Brittany cornered Mia in the bathroom with two of her friends. "I heard you've been playing detective," Brittany said, her voice cold. "I don't know what you're talking about," Mia replied, trying to move past them. One of Brittany's friends, a tall girl named Ashley Foster, blocked her path. "Your phone, give it to me." "No," Mia said. Brittany grabbed Mia's bag and dumped its contents on the floor. Mia's phone clattered on the tiles, and before Mia could grab it, Ashley snatched it up. "What's the password?" Ashley demanded. When Mia didn't answer, Brittany grabbed the phone and smashed it against the sink. The screen shattered, and the phone went dark. "Oops," Brittany said sweetly. "I guess you'll have to be more careful." They left Mia standing there, shaking with anger and fear. But what they didn't know was that Mia had already backed everything up to the cloud. The evidence was safe. That evening, Brittany sat in her bedroom, scrolling through the increasingly hostile comments on her social media. People were starting to turn against her. Some of the comments were brutal, calling her a bully, a spoiled brat. Worse things she didn't want to read. She heard her father shouting downstairs on the phone, his voice carrying through the house. The school board had received multiple complaints. A local journalist was asking questions. The pressure was mounting, and for the first time, Brittany felt genuinely scared. Chad, on the other hand, was doubling down. He posted a video statement on his social media, his face serious and practiced. "I want to address what happened at the pep rally," he said to the camera. "I was trying to participate in what I thought was a friendly demonstration. Instead, I was attacked by someone with dangerous training. Aisha Coleman is a threat to student safety, and I'm glad the school took action." The video got mixed reactions. His supporters rallied behind him, but others saw through the act. Comments called him a coward, a liar, and worse. Meanwhile, Aisha spent her suspension at home, trying to stay away from social media, but unable to completely disconnect. The attention was overwhelming, but there was one bright spot in all the chaos. On Wednesday afternoon, there was a knock at the apartment door. Diane answered it to find Sensei Harris standing there with a newspaper in his hand. "May I speak with Aisha?" he asked. They sat at the kitchen table and Sensei Harris spread out the newspaper. It was a sports section from a regional paper, and there was an article about the regional youth karate championship coming up in 3 weeks. "You should compete," he said simply. Aisha stared at the article. "I don't know if I'm ready." "You're more ready than you think," Sensei Harris replied. But this isn't about proving anything to them. This is about proving something to yourself, that you're still you, that they didn't take that away. Aisha looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. Okay, Aisha said quietly. I'll do it. That same day, something unexpected happened. Aisha's father called. Diane answered, and her face went through a series of emotions: surprise, anger, confusion, before she handed the phone to Aisha. Hello? Aisha said hesitantly. Baby girl. Marcus Coleman's deep voice came through the line. I saw what happened. I'm coming home. Aisha's breath caught. What? When? My leave got approved. I'll be there in 2 days, he said. I should have been there all along. I'm sorry. Tears rolled down Aisha's cheeks. It's okay, Dad. No, it's not, he said. But I'm going to make it right, I promise. When Aisha hung up, she looked at her mother, who was crying too. They hugged, both of them releasing years of held-in emotion. He's really coming? Aisha whispered. He's really coming, Diane confirmed. Friday morning, Aisha woke up to news that made everything else seem small in comparison. Mr. Lopez's letter to the school board had leaked to the press. A local news station ran a story titled, Principal Accused of Covering Up Bullying at Brookridge High. The story included interviews with students, screenshots of the hateful videos posted by Chad and Brittany, and expert commentary about the school's failure to protect vulnerable students. By noon, it was the top story in the region. Principal Hale called an emergency press conference, but it only made things worse. When asked why he had suspended Aisha but not Chad, he fumbled through his answer, his bias showing clearly. That afternoon, the school board announced that Principal Hale was being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. The news rippled through Brookridge High like an earthquake. Sunday evening, Aisha stood at the airport baggage claim with her mother, watching passengers stream through the arrival gate. Then she saw him, her father, Marcus Coleman, in civilian clothes, a duffel bag over his shoulder. He looked older, tired, but when his eyes found hers, his face broke into a smile. Aisha, he said, dropping his bag and opening his arms. She ran to him, colliding with his chest, and for the first time in months, she felt truly safe. That night, Marcus stood in the doorway of Aisha's room, watching her practice on her mat. She moved through her kata, each movement precise and powerful. When she finished, she turned and saw him there. You still remember the stance, he said softly, echoing the words he'd said years ago. I never forgot, Dad, Aisha replied. I just stopped believing in it for a while. Well, I'm here now, he said, and I'm going to watch you compete at that championship. I'm going to be there, in the front row, cheering louder than anyone else. Aisha smiled, tears streaming down her face. I'd like that. As the week ended, news broke that the school board was opening a formal investigation into bullying at Brookridge High. The board also announced that Aisha's suspension was being lifted and expunged from her record. The tide was turning, slowly but surely. But the real battle was still ahead. The Regional Youth Karate Championship was in 2 weeks, and Aisha had a lot of training to do. Not to prove herself to Brookridge High, but to prove to herself that she could still be the champion she once was. The buzz and energy inside the convention center was electric. The Regional Youth Karate Championship drew competitors from across 3 states, and the main arena was already packed with spectators by 9 in the morning. Aisha stood in the competitor waiting area, her crisp white guy pristine, her black belt tied with the kind of precision that came from years of practice. Around her, other fighters stretched and warmed up, some looking confident, others nervous. She could hear the murmur of the crowd through the walls, voices blending together into a constant hum of anticipation. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her belt for the 3rd time. It had been over a year since she'd competed at this level, and the weight of everything that had happened at Brookridge High pressed down on her shoulders. "Breathe, baby girl." Her father's voice came from beside her. Marcus Coleman sat on the bench watching his daughter with eyes full of pride and concern. "You've done this 100 times before. Not with half the state watching," Aisha replied, managing a weak smile. It was true. Word had spread about the viral video from the pep rally. News outlets had picked up the story, framing Aisha as either a hero standing up to bullies or a dangerous student who used excessive force, depending on which channel you watched. Either way, her name was everywhere, and people had come specifically to see the girl from the viral video compete. Marcus reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Listen to me. You're not fighting for them. You're not fighting to prove anything to those kids at your school. You're fighting because this is who you are. This is what you love. Remember that." Aisha nodded, taking a deep breath and letting it out slowly. "Thanks, Dad." In the stands, Diane Coleman sat beside Sensei Harris, both of them scanning the crowd nervously. A few rows behind them, Mia sat with her sketchpad, already drawing the scene before her. She'd insisted on coming to support her friend, even though her parents had been reluctant after the phone incident. Meanwhile, back at Brookridge High, Brittany Hale sat in her room, scrolling through social media with growing dread. The investigation into her father had exploded over the weekend. News vans had been parked outside their house. Reporters had tried to interview her mother. The school board had announced that Principal Hale was officially under investigation for misconduct and bias. But it was the online comments that really hurt. Former friends had turned on her. People were sharing old videos of her bullying other students, not just Aisha. Screenshots of cruel messages she'd sent were circulating. Her follower count was dropping by the hour. She tried calling Chad, but he didn't answer. She tried again. Still nothing. Finally, she texted him, "We need to talk." His response came 5 minutes later. "Leave me alone. You're toxic." Brittany stared at the message, feeling something break inside her chest. For the first time in her life, she was alone. Truly alone. At the championship, the first round was about to begin. Aisha walked onto the mat, bowing to the judges before taking her position. Her opponent was a tall girl from a dojo in Pennsylvania, her movements sharp and aggressive as they faced off. The referee signaled the start, and the girl attacked immediately, going for a quick point with a high kick. Aisha blocked it cleanly, feeling her muscle memory take over. The crowd noise faded. The pressure disappeared. In that moment, it was just her and her opponent, and the years of training guiding her body through each movement. She countered with a combination, a swift strike to the midsection followed by a spinning back kick that stopped just inches from her opponent's chest. The judges raised their flags. Point for Aisha. The girl came at her again, more cautiously this time. They exchanged blows, both landing points, but Aisha's technique was cleaner, more precise. When the timer buzzed, Aisha had won the match decisively. As she bowed and walked off the mat, she heard her father's voice above all others. "That's my girl." She looked up into the stands and saw him on his feet, clapping and cheering like she'd just won the Olympics. Despite everything, she couldn't help but smile. Back at school, Mr. Lopez was in the middle of teaching his afternoon history class when there was a knock on his door. The assistant principal, Mrs. Rachel Bennett, stood in the hallway with a somber expression. "Mr. Lopez, can I speak with you for a moment?" He stepped into the hall and Mrs. Bennett handed him an envelope. "The school board wanted me to give you this personally." Mr. Lopez opened it, expecting the worst. Instead, he found a letter thanking him for bringing the harassment issues to light and informing him that he was being promoted to vice principal, effective immediately. The board felt that the school needs leadership that prioritizes student safety. Mrs. Bennett explained, Your actions, while unconventional, showed exactly the kind of integrity we need." Mr. Lopez was speechless for a moment. "What about Principal Hale?" "He's being removed from his position pending the completion of the investigation," Mrs. Bennett said. The evidence was overwhelming. In the convention center, Aisha's first match victory had drawn even more attention. Between rounds, reporters tried to approach her, but Sensei Harris intercepted them, his stern expression making it clear that they weren't welcome. Marcus stood beside him like a second barrier, his military bearing enough to make most people think twice about pushing forward. "How does it feel to be back?" one reporter called out, undeterred. Aisha paused, considering the question. "It feels right," she said simply before walking back to the waiting area. Her semi-final match was against a skilled competitor from Illinois, a girl named Rebecca Foster, who had won multiple regional championships. The crowd hushed as they took their positions. This match would determine who went to the finals. Rebecca was fast, her strikes coming in rapid combinations that tested Aisha's defense. They traded points back and forth, the scoreboard staying close throughout the first 2 minutes. Then, during a brief pause, Aisha glanced at the stands and caught her father's eye. He wasn't shouting anymore. He was just watching, his hand over his heart. And in that gesture, Aisha saw everything he'd never been able to say over the years. The regret, the pride, the love. Something shifted inside her. She wasn't fighting to prove she was good enough. She wasn't fighting to show the world anything. She was fighting because this was her art, her discipline, her passion. The same passion her father had given her when she was just a little girl learning her first stance. The referee signaled them to continue. This time, Aisha moved with a fluidity she hadn't felt in months. She anticipated Rebecca's next attack, deflected it smoothly, and countered with a perfectly executed combination that scored 3 points in quick succession. The buzzer sounded. Aisha had won by a narrow margin, but she'd won cleanly. Rebecca bowed deeply, respect clear in her eyes. "That was incredible," she said. "Good luck in the finals." As Aisha walked off the mat, the crowd erupted in applause. The championship camera, streaming the event live online, captured her father pushing through the crowd to meet her at the edge of the arena. He wrapped her in a tight embrace, and she heard him whisper, "You've already won by standing tall." The moment was captured and shared across social media within minutes. But unlike the previous viral videos, this one told a different story. This wasn't about conflict or controversy. This was about redemption, about a girl reclaiming her power through discipline and grace. Back at Brookridge High, the end-of-day announcements included something unprecedented. Mrs. Bennett's voice came over the intercom. "Students, I want to address some recent events. The school board has completed its preliminary investigation into bullying and administrative misconduct at our school. As a result, several changes are being made to ensure student safety. We will be holding a mandatory assembly on Monday to discuss new policies and consequences for harassment." The cafeteria went silent. Students exchanged glances, some looking worried, others relieved. "Additionally," Mrs. Bennett continued, "I want to take this moment to acknowledge Aisha Coleman, who represented herself with dignity and restraint in the face of harassment. Aisha, if you're watching the stream of the championship, the entire Brookridge community is proud of you." The announcement was met with mixed reactions. The scholarship kids erupted in cheers and applause. The wealthier students sat in uncomfortable silence, but the message was clear. Things were changing. That evening, the finals took place under bright lights and with a crowd twice the size of the earlier matches. Aisha's opponent was a national-level competitor from Ohio, a boy named Marcus Wright, ironically sharing her father's name, who had won 3 consecutive regional championships. The match was intense from the first second. Marcus Wright was aggressive and confident, his strikes powerful and precise. Aisha had to work harder than she had in any previous match, Her defense tested again and again. She scored points, but so did he. The match stayed close, each competitor refusing to give an inch. With 30 seconds left, they were tied. The crowd was on its feet, the noise deafening. Aisha felt exhaustion creeping into her muscles, her breathing heavy. She glanced at the clock, then at her opponent, who looked equally tired. In that moment, she heard Sensei Harris's voice in her head. Fighting isn't about being stronger, it's about being smarter. She changed her strategy. Instead of matching Marcus Wright's aggression, she focused on precision and timing. She let him attack, waited for the right opening, and then struck with a perfectly placed kick to the midsection that scored 2 points. The buzzer sounded before Wright could counter. The referee raised Aisha's hand. She'd won the Regional Youth Karate Championship by the narrowest of margins. The arena erupted. Her father rushed onto the mat, lifting her into the air as the crowd chanted her name. Sensei Harris followed, his face beaming with pride. Mia was crying in the stands, sketching furiously to capture the moment. During the medal ceremony, the referee raised Aisha's hand as the crowd roared its approval. The championship camera captured her emotional embrace with her father, the two of them holding each other like they were the only people in the world. But the most powerful moment came after the ceremony. As Aisha stood holding her trophy, a young girl, maybe 10 years old, approached her nervously. "Excuse me," the girl said quietly. "Are you Aisha Coleman?" "I am," Aisha replied, kneeling down to the girl's level. "I saw your video," the girl said, "the one where those kids were mean to you. And I saw how you didn't fight back until you had to. I get bullied at my school too, and I didn't know what to do. But watching you, it helped me understand that being strong doesn't mean being mean back." Aisha felt tears prick at her eyes. She reached out and hugged the girl gently. "You're stronger than you know," she whispered. "Never forget that." That night, as news of Aisha's victory spread online, something else happened. Brittany Hale sat alone in her dark bedroom, watching videos of the championship on her phone. She watched Aisha receive her medal. She watched the young girl approach her. She watched the genuine kindness in Aisha's response. And for the first time, Brittany saw herself clearly. Not as the victim of circumstances, but as the villain of someone else's story. She opened her laptop and began typing. It took her 2 hours to write what would become a private apology letter to Aisha. She didn't sign it. She wasn't ready for that. But she printed it, folded it carefully, and placed it in an envelope. The next morning, she slipped it into Aisha's locker at school before anyone else arrived. That same night, news crews reported on Principal Hale's official removal from Brookridge High. The investigation had revealed a pattern of bias and misconduct spanning several years. The school board issued a formal apology to Aisha and her family, along with several other students who had been failed by the administration. The parallel stories, Aisha's triumph at the championship and the school's reckoning with its failures, became intertwined in the public consciousness. She had become more than just a viral video. She had become a symbol of resilience, discipline, and the power of standing firm in the face of injustice. Monday morning arrived with a crispness in the air that made everything feel new. Aisha walked through the front doors of Brookridge High with her head held high, her father's words from the weekend still echoing in her mind. "You walk in there like the champion you are." The hallways were different now. Students stopped and stared, but not with mockery, with respect. Some even approached her to offer congratulations on her championship win. The scholarship kids smiled and nodded as she passed. Even some of the wealthier students who had previously ignored her seemed to look at her with something approaching admiration. Her locker, when she opened it, contained the usual books and supplies. But there was also an envelope, plain white, unsealed, with no name on it. She opened it carefully and read the handwritten note inside. I wish I could say this to your face, but I'm not brave enough yet. I'm sorry for everything I did to you. I'm sorry for being cruel when you were just trying to exist. I'm sorry for not seeing you as a person. Watching you win that championship while I was losing everything made me realize that strength isn't about tearing others down. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I see now what I couldn't see before. You were always the better person. The letter wasn't signed, but Aisha knew who it was from. She folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. She wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet, maybe not ever. But she whispered to herself, "That's enough." The morning announcements were different, too. Mrs. Bennett's voice carried a firmness that Principal Hales never had. "Good morning, Brookridge High. Today marks a new chapter for our school. At our assembly this afternoon, we'll be introducing the Stand Strong Initiative, a comprehensive anti-bullying program designed to protect all students, regardless of their background or economic status. Zero tolerance means zero tolerance. Harassment, discrimination, and violence will result in immediate consequences, up to and including expulsion." The cafeteria buzzed with nervous energy during lunch. Aisha sat with Mia, who was excitedly showing her sketches from the championship. "I captured the moment your dad hugged you," Mia said, turning her sketchbook around. "Look, the drawing was beautiful, simple lines capturing raw emotion." Aisha stared at it, feeling a lump form in her throat. "Can I keep this?" she asked. "It's yours," Mia said, tearing the page out carefully. "You inspired it." Across the cafeteria, Chad Miller sat alone at a table that used to be filled with his crew. Tyler had transferred schools after his parents saw the videos. The other guys had distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. Chad stared down at his untouched lunch, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on him. His phone buzzed. It was an email from the State Athletic Association. His scholarship offers had been withdrawn pending the investigation into his conduct. The football career he'd counted on was crumbling before his eyes. He looked up and caught sight of Aisha across the cafeteria. She was laughing at something Mia had said, looking lighter than he'd ever seen her. He wanted to hate her for ruining his life, but he knew the truth. He'd ruined it himself. That afternoon, the entire school gathered in the gymnasium for the assembly. The bleachers were packed, the mood tense with anticipation. Mrs. Bennett stood at the podium, flanked by several school board members and Mr. Lopez, who now wore a lanyard identifying him as vice principal. "Students of Brookridge High," Mrs. Bennett began. "Recent events have forced us to look honestly at the culture we've allowed to develop in our school. We've failed many of you. We've looked away when we should have intervened. We've protected some students while leaving others vulnerable. That ends today." She went on to detail the new policies: mandatory training for all staff on recognizing and addressing bullying, anonymous reporting systems for students, consequences for administrators who fail to act, and restorative justice programs for students who commit harassment. "But policies alone aren't enough," Mrs. Bennett continued. "Culture change requires every single one of you to make different choices, to speak up when you see injustice, to support each other instead of tearing each other down, to understand that true strength comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down." Then she did something unexpected. She invited Sensei Harris to speak. The retired Marine walked to the podium with measured steps, his presence commanding immediate attention. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the gym. "I've been teaching martial arts for 40 years, he said, "and the first thing I tell every new student is this: discipline isn't just a sport. It's how you face the world. When the world's unfair, it's how you respond when someone tries to make you small. It's how you stand up without tearing others down." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. Aisha Coleman didn't win that championship because she was the strongest fighter in the room. She won because she had the discipline to stay focused when everything around her was chaos. She had the restraint to defend herself without becoming the aggressor. That's what real strength looks like, and that's what I hope all of you will learn. The gymnasium erupted in applause. Students, from both sides of the social divide, stood and clapped. Aisha, sitting near the back with Mia, felt tears streaming down her face as the weight of the past weeks finally began to lift. After the assembly, something remarkable happened. Students began approaching Aisha in the hallways, not just to congratulate her, but to share their own stories. A freshman boy told her about being mocked for his stutter. A senior girl talked about being excluded because she couldn't afford designer clothes. One by one, students who had been invisible found their voices. Mr. Lopez watched it all from his new office, a small smile on his face. This was what he'd hoped for when he sent that letter to the school board. Not punishment for punishment's sake, but real change that would ripple out and touch everyone. That evening, Chad Miller showed up at the school gym just as it was closing. He was there for his court-mandated community service, cleaning the facility as part of his punishment. Mr. Jenkins, the janitor, was there to supervise. "Trash needs emptying," Mr. Jenkins said, handing Chad a bin. "Floors need mopping. Let's get to it." Chad worked in silence, humiliated by the fall from grace. An hour into his shift, Aisha walked into the gym with her father, heading to the small auxiliary room that the school had agreed to let Sensei Harris use for training sessions. Chad and Aisha's eyes met across the space. Neither spoke. Chad looked away first, his face reddening, and returned to mopping. Humility had replaced the arrogance that used to define him. In the training room, Aisha and her father worked through katas together, moving in synchronized rhythm like they had years ago. It felt like coming home. "You proud of yourself, baby girl?" Marcus asked during a water break. "I'm getting there," Aisha replied honestly. "I think I'm more at peace than proud." "That's even better," he said, pulling her into a side hug. Over the next few days, the transformation at Brookridge High continued. The scholarship students, emboldened by Aisha's example, started their own support group. Mia organized a student art show that featured work from kids across all social groups, breaking down barriers that had existed for years. Brittany Hale, meanwhile, remained largely invisible. She'd deleted her social media accounts and stopped wearing her cheerleading jacket. She ate lunch alone in the library, avoiding everyone, but one afternoon she found herself in the art room watching Mia work on a large canvas. "What are you painting?" Brittany asked quietly. Mia looked up, surprised. "A mural. For the gym. Mrs. Bennett approved it." "What's it going to be?" Mia showed her the sketch, a silhouette of Aisha mid-kick with the words, "Strength is silence until it speaks," written below. Brittany stared at it for a long moment. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's beautiful. Not like... I mean her spirit, the way she handled everything." Mia studied Brittany's face, seeing something she'd never seen before. Genuine remorse. "You could tell her that," Mia suggested carefully. Brittany shook her head. "She shouldn't have to hear anything from me. I just wanted you to know. The mural is perfect." She left before Mia could respond. Friday evening, as the first week of the new era at Brookridge was ending, Aisha stood in front of the completed mural in the gymnasium. The silhouette was powerful, captured in a moment of perfect balance and strength. The words below seemed to glow in the late afternoon light streaming through the windows. Students gathered around to see it, taking photos and posting them with hashtags like "Stand Strong" and "Nasa Brookridge United." What had started as one girl's quiet resistance had become a movement that touched everyone. That night, Aisha sat with her parents at the kitchen table eating her mother's homemade lasagna. The conversation was light, filled with laughter and stories. Her father talked about his plans to stay stateside, taking a training position that would keep him home. Her mother shared news from the hospital, animated and bright. Aisha looked around the table and realized something profound. She hadn't just survived the bullying at Brookridge High. She'd transformed it into something meaningful. She'd turned her pain into power, her silence into strength, her isolation into connection. "What are you thinking about, baby?" her mother asked. Aisha smiled. "I'm thinking about how different everything is now, how I'm different." "You're not different," Marcus said, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "You're just finally showing the world who you've always been." Later that night, Aisha received a message request on social media from an account she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of her. When she opened it, she found a simple message. "Thank you for showing me what strength really means. I have a long way to go to become a better person, but watching you made me want to try." Aisha stared at the message for a long time. She didn't respond. She wasn't sure she ever would. But she didn't delete it either. Some things needed time, and some wounds needed to heal in their own way. She closed her laptop and walked to her window, looking out at the night sky. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sounds of the city. Cars passing, music playing. Life, continuing. Tomorrow she would go back to school. She would continue training at the dojo. She would keep being herself, standing strong, living with discipline and grace. The girl who had walked into Brookridge High weeks ago, scared and uncertain, was gone. In her place was someone who understood that true victory wasn't about defeating enemies. It was about refusing to become one. As she turned away from the window, she caught sight of her reflection in the mirror. Behind her, her black belt hung on the wall, and beside it, her championship medal gleamed softly in the moonlight. She smiled. 3 weeks after the championship, Aisha's life had settled into a new rhythm. But the attention hadn't faded the way she'd hoped. Her phone rang constantly with interview requests. News stations wanted her story. Podcasts reached out. A publisher even contacted her mother about writing a book. Aisha sat on her bed, staring at an email from a national morning show. They wanted her to fly to New York for an interview. The subject line read, "Share your inspiring story with America." "I didn't do this to be famous," she said aloud, though she was alone in her room. Her mother appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. "Then why did you do it, baby?" Aisha thought for a moment. "To be heard. To make sure they couldn't do to someone else what they did to me." "Then maybe that's what you should say," Diane suggested. "You don't have to do every interview, but the ones you do, use them to say what matters." That evening, the family sat together in the living room. Marcus had moved back in permanently, and the apartment felt fuller, warmer. They were watching the local news when a segment came on about Brookridge High's transformation. "The Stand Strong initiative has become a model for schools across the state," the reporter said, standing in front of the school. "What started as one student's courage has sparked a movement for change in how schools address bullying and protect vulnerable students." The segment included interviews with students, including a shy freshman boy who said, "Before Aisha, I thought I just had to accept being picked on. Now I know I have a voice." Aisha watched, feeling something shift inside her chest. This was bigger than her now. It had taken on a life of its own. The next day, she agreed to do the morning show interview. They flew her and her parents to New York on a Thursday, and Friday morning she sat in a bright studio across from a host named Jennifer Hayes. "Aisha Coleman, thank you for being here," Jennifer said warmly. "The video of you at the pep rally has been viewed over 20 million times. How does that feel?" "Honestly, overwhelming," Aisha replied. "I never wanted that kind of attention. But you handled the situation with remarkable composure," Jennifer pressed. "When Chad attacked you, you defended yourself without escalating. How?" Aisha took a deep breath, remembering Sensei Harris's coaching before the interview. "Speak from your heart. Tell the truth. My sensei taught me that martial arts isn't about violence, Aisha said. It's about discipline, control. When you train properly, you learn that the greatest strength is knowing when not to fight. I could have hurt Chad that day, but that would have made me just like him. I refused to become what they were. The interview continued for 10 minutes, and when it aired, the clip went viral again. But this time the comments were different. Parents praised her maturity. Teachers shared it with their students. Martial arts schools used it as an example of what true discipline looked like. The hashtag #RespectForMyself began trending, inspired by Aisha's closing words in the interview. I defended myself because I respect myself too much to accept being treated that way. While Aisha's star rose, Chad Miller's world continued to crumble. His community service extended from weeks to months after he'd been caught trying to skip sessions. College scouts who had once courted him stopped returning calls. His former friends avoided him in the hallways. One evening, while cleaning the gym after hours, Chad found himself alone with the mural Mia had painted. He stood in front of it for a long time, staring at the silhouette of Aisha, in perfect form. Those words beneath. Strength is silence until it speaks. He thought about his own silence, the times he'd seen other students bullying someone and said nothing, the times he'd laughed along even when he knew it was wrong, the times he'd chosen popularity over integrity. For the first time in his life, Chad felt ashamed of who he'd been. Mr. Jenkins appeared from the equipment room pushing a cart. He saw Chad standing there and paused. "Powerful, isn't it?" the janitor said. Chad nodded, not trusting his voice. "You know what I learned in my 70 years on this planet?" Mr. Jenkins continued, walking over to stand beside him. "It's never too late to become who you should have been. But it takes work. Real work. Not just saying sorry, but changing." "I don't know how," Chad admitted quietly. "Start by being honest," Mr. Jenkins said. "With yourself first, then with the people you hurt." Across town, Brittany Hale sat in a community center waiting for her first group therapy session to begin. Her mother had found the program, a restorative justice circle for young people who had caused harm to others. Brittany had resisted at first, but after weeks of isolation and regret, she'd agreed to try. The facilitator, a woman named Dr. Lisa Washington, welcomed the small group of teenagers into the circle. There were 6 of them, all there for different reasons, all carrying the weight of their actions. "This is a safe space," Dr. Washington began. "We're here not to judge, but to understand, to take responsibility, and to find a path forward. Who wants to start?" Brittany's hand shook as she raised it. "I'll go." She told her story, not making excuses, not blaming her father or her privilege or anything else. Just the truth about what she'd done to Aisha and others, about the videos, the harassment, the cruelty. "Why did you do it?" Dr. Washington asked gently. Brittany wiped tears from her face. "Because I could. Because nobody stopped me. Because I didn't see her as a person. I saw her as someone beneath me, and that made it okay in my mind. But it was never okay." Saying it out loud, admitting it to strangers, felt like removing a splinter that had been buried too deep for too long. It hurt, but it was necessary. "What do you want now?" Dr. Washington asked. "I want to be better," Brittany said. "I wish I'd had Aisha's strength back then." "You still can," Dr. Washington replied. "Strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you choose every single day." Meanwhile, Sensei Harris's dojo was experiencing something unexpected, a surge in enrollment. After his speech at the school assembly, parents had started calling, asking about classes. The old dojo, which had been struggling financially, was suddenly full of students eager to learn not just self-defense, but the discipline and character that came with it. Aisha found herself in a new role, Helping teach the beginner classes, she worked with kids of all ages, showing them basic stances, correcting their form, and most importantly, teaching them the philosophy behind the movements. Karate isn't about being tough, she told a class of 10-year-olds one evening. It's about being balanced. In here, she tapped her chest, and out here, she gestured to her body. When you're balanced inside, the outside takes care of itself. One of the students, a small girl with glasses named Emma Taylor, raised her hand. What if someone's being mean to you? How do you stay balanced then? Aisha knelt down to Emma's level. You remember that their meanness is about them, not you. You stand tall, you speak up when you can, and you don't let them make you small. That's what balance really means. After class, Emma's mother approached Aisha with tears in her eyes. My daughter has been bullied at school for months. She's been scared, withdrawn. But tonight, driving home, she told me she feels brave. Thank you. These moments, quiet, personal, real, meant more to Aisha than any viral video or news interview ever could. At Brookridge High, the transformation continued. The student support group that started with scholarship kids had grown to include students from every background. They met weekly to discuss issues, share experiences, and support each other. Mia led many of the meetings, using art therapy techniques to help students process their emotions. During one meeting, a junior named Tyler spoke up. I used to think being popular meant being powerful, but watching what happened this year, real power is what Aisha showed. Standing firm without destroying yourself or others. His words reflected a broader shift in the school culture. The old hierarchies were breaking down. Students who had never spoken to each other were forming friendships. The cafeteria, once strictly divided, now saw mixed groups at many tables. Mr. Lopez, settling into his role as vice principal, observed these changes with quiet satisfaction. He'd risked everything by speaking up, and seeing the results made it worthwhile. One afternoon, he called Aisha to his office. She came in nervously, unsure what to expect. Relax, he said with a smile. You're not in trouble. I wanted to show you something. He pulled out a folder full of letters and emails. These are from students at other schools who heard about what happened here. They're asking for help implementing similar programs. Aisha, what you started here is spreading. I thought you should know the impact you're having. Aisha read through some of the letters, seeing her own experience reflected in the words of students across the state and beyond. Kids who felt invisible, who dealt with bullying, who needed to know they weren't alone. I just wanted to survive high school, she said softly. You did more than survive, Mr. Lopez replied. You showed everyone what integrity looks like. That weekend, Marcus took Aisha back to the old garage where he'd first taught her martial arts years ago. The space was dusty now, filled with storage boxes, but the memories were vivid. You remember our first lesson? He asked. Balance, Aisha replied. Everything starts with balance. Marcus nodded. I left because I thought you didn't need me anymore. You were so talented, so strong. I convinced myself that my absence wouldn't matter, but I was wrong, and I'm sorry for that, baby girl. Dad, I forgave you already, Aisha said. I know, Marcus replied, but I need to say it anyway. You gave me the discipline that saved me. That's what I told your sensei when I came back. But the truth is, you gave yourself that discipline. You held on to it when I wasn't there. You used it when the world was unfair. That wasn't me, baby. That was all you. They embraced, both crying now, releasing years of pain and regret and love. I'm proud of you, Marcus whispered. Not because you won a championship, not because you're famous, because of who you are when no one's watching. Aisha squeezed her father tighter, finally understanding that redemption wasn't about grand gestures or public victories. It was about these quiet moments of truth and healing. At the community center, Brittany's therapy sessions continued. Over several weeks, she'd begun the difficult work of understanding why she'd behaved the way she had. Dr. Washington pushed her to look beyond surface explanations. Hurt people, Dr. Washington said during one session. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it helps explain it. What hurt were you carrying, Brittany? Brittany thought for a long time. My dad was never around. Even when he was home, he was working or thinking about work. The only time he noticed me was when I was perfect. Perfect grades, perfect appearance, perfect popularity. I think I was mean to others because I felt so powerless with him. That's honest, Dr. Washington said. Now what? Now I have to make amends, Brittany said, or try to anyway. She'd been working on a letter to Aisha, a real one this time, signed with her name. Not asking for forgiveness, but taking full responsibility. She'd rewritten it dozens of times, never quite finding the right words. One evening, she finally finished it. Her hand shook as she sealed the envelope and addressed it. Tomorrow, she would give it to Mia to pass along. She couldn't face Aisha directly. Not yet, maybe not ever. But she could take this step. As the 7th week since the championship ended, Aisha stood in front of the mirror in her room, tying her black belt around her waist. But this time, it wasn't for competition or demonstration. It was for herself, a reminder of who she was and who she'd become. She thought about the scared girl who'd walked into Brookridge High months ago, trying to be invisible. She thought about the moment everything changed, not at the pep rally, but in the quiet decision to stop accepting being treated as less than. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mia. Brittany gave me something for you. I can bring it Monday if you want. Aisha stared at the message. She knew what it was. Another letter, probably. She typed back, okay. She wasn't sure she'd read it. She wasn't sure she'd forgive. But she was sure of one thing. She wouldn't let Brittany's guilt or anyone else's expectations dictate her healing. That would happen on her own timeline, in her own way. Looking at her reflection, she whispered the words that had become her mantra. Respect for myself. 1 year later, Aisha walked through the front doors of Brookridge High for the last time as a student. It was graduation day, and the morning sun cast long golden rays across the hallway floors. The school looked the same, but everything felt different. She'd received the letter from the National Karate Federation a month ago, an official invitation to represent her state at the national championships in August. But more importantly, she'd been accepted to 3 universities, all offering scholarships that had nothing to do with karate and everything to do with her grades and character. Her locker, when she opened it one final time, contained memories. Photos Mia had taken throughout the year, notes from students thanking her for inspiring them, a pressed flower from the bouquet her parents had given her after the regional championship. Ready for the big day? Mia appeared beside her, wearing her graduation gown, her art portfolio tucked under one arm. As ready as I'll ever be, Aisha replied. They walked together toward the gymnasium, where families were already gathering in the bleachers. The transformation of the space was complete now. Mia's mural had been joined by others, created by students who wanted to contribute to the school's new identity. The walls told stories of courage, diversity, and unity. As they took their seats with the other graduating seniors, Aisha scanned the crowd. Her mother sat in the 3rd row, wearing her best dress, a huge smile on her face. Beside her, Marcus was in his dress uniform, looking every bit the proud father. And a few rows back, she spotted Sensei Harris, who gave her a small nod when their eyes met. The ceremony began with the usual speeches and formalities. Mrs. Bennett, now officially the principal after the board made her appointment permanent, spoke about the changes the school had undergone. This graduating class has witnessed and participated in a transformation, she said. You've shown us that change is possible when people choose courage over comfort, integrity over popularity, and compassion over cruelty. You're leaving Brookridge High better than you found it. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The student speaker wasn't the valedictorian or student body president. By unanimous vote of the senior class, Aisha Coleman had been chosen to give the commencement address. She walked to the podium, her heart pounding but her steps steady. Looking out at the sea of faces, students, teachers, families, she took a deep breath. "When I transferred to Brookridge High last year, I just wanted to be invisible," she began. "I'd learned that being seen meant being targeted, so I kept my head down, spoke only when spoken to, and tried to take up as little space as possible." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But invisibility is its own kind of prison, and when people started noticing me anyway, not because of anything I'd done, but because of who I was and where I came from, I had a choice to make. Stay invisible and accept being treated as less than, or stand up and risk making things worse." The gymnasium was silent, every person hanging on her words. Discipline isn't about being tough. It's not about never being scared or hurt or angry. Discipline is about choosing who you want to be when everything in you wants to react. It's about balance between what we can do and what we choose to do, between silence and speaking up, between protecting ourselves and becoming what we're fighting against. She looked directly at the students in the front rows. "Some of you know what it's like to be targeted. Some of you know what it's like to be the one doing the targeting. Some of you stood by and watched, and some of you spoke up. All of us have learned something this year about who we are when we're tested." Her voice grew stronger. "I learned that strength belongs to everyone. It's not something you're born with. It's something you choose every single day. You choose it when you stand up for someone being bullied. You choose it when you admit you were wrong and work to do better. You choose it when you refuse to let the world make you small." She glanced at her parents, drawing strength from their presence. "To my fellow graduates, we're leaving this place today. Some of us with scars, some with regrets, some with pride, but all of us with lessons we'll carry forever. My hope is that we carry forward the idea that true victory isn't about defeating enemies. It's about refusing to become one." The applause started slowly, then built into a standing ovation. Even students who had never supported her stood and clapped. In that moment, Aisha understood that healing wasn't about everyone liking you. It was about standing in your truth regardless. After the ceremony, as families mingled on the lawn and students took photos in their caps and gowns, Aisha found herself surrounded by well-wishers. Teachers congratulated her. Classmates asked for photos. Parents thanked her for inspiring their children. Then she saw Brittany. She stood apart from the crowd, wearing her gown but looking uncertain. When their eyes met, Brittany didn't look away. Instead, she walked over slowly. "Congratulations," Brittany said quietly. "Thanks," Aisha replied, unsure where this was going. "I know you got my letter," Brittany continued. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted to say in person that I'm sorry, truly sorry, and that watching you this year taught me more about strength than I learned in 17 years before that." Aisha studied Brittany's face. She saw genuine remorse there, but also something else. The beginning of self-awareness, the seed of change. "I read your letter," Aisha said. "Thank you for writing it. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly, but it was acknowledgement. It was enough for now." Brittany nodded, understanding. "I hope you do amazing things," she said, then walked away before Aisha could respond. Mia appeared at Aisha's elbow. "You okay?" "Yeah," Aisha said, watching Brittany disappear into the crowd. "I think I am." Later that afternoon, there was a gathering at Sensei Harris's dojo. He'd organized a small celebration for Aisha's graduation, and the space was filled with students from the dojo, her family, and close friends. "Speech! Speech!" someone called out, and soon the whole room was chanting. Aisha laughed, holding up her hands. "I already gave one today. This one's just for us. Sensei Harris said with a grin. She looked around at the faces before her, the people who had supported her, taught her, believed in her even when she struggled to believe in herself. "Okay," she said. "Here's what I want to say. They said I was just a poor girl, someone who didn't belong, who wasn't good enough, who should stay in her place. But you know what? Turns out I was rich. Rich in the only things that really matter: discipline, integrity, people who love me, and the strength to keep standing up." She paused, emotion catching in her throat. "This dojo, this discipline, this life, it's taught me that you don't need money or status or popularity to be powerful. You just need balance. You just need to respect yourself enough to refuse being treated as less than. And you need people who remind you of that when you forget." The room erupted in applause and cheers. Marcus pulled her into a hug, and Diane joined them, creating a family embrace that felt like home. That evening, as the sun set over the city, Aisha returned to Brookridge High one last time. She stood in front of Mia's mural, studying the silhouette of herself in perfect form, reading those words she'd read 100 times. "Strength is silence until it speaks." She thought about everything that had happened in this building. The pain, the growth, the transformation. Not just her own, but the entire school's. The Stand Strong initiative was now being implemented in schools across the state. The anti-bullying program had become a model for districts nationwide, and it had all started with one girl refusing to accept being pushed down. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Hi Aisha, my name is Sarah. I go to Jefferson High across town. I saw your graduation speech online. I've been dealing with bullies for 2 years, and today I finally reported it. Thank you for showing me it's okay to stand up. You saved my life." Aisha read the message 3 times, tears streaming down her face. This was the real legacy. Not the trophies or the viral videos or the news interviews, but the quiet courage she'd sparked in others, the ripple effect of one person choosing dignity over silence. She typed back, "You saved your own life by being brave. I'm proud of you. Stay strong." Months later, at the national championships, Aisha stood on the mat facing opponents from across the country. Her father and mother sat in the front row just as they'd promised. Every move she made echoed her journey. The discipline to stay controlled, the strength to defend without aggression, the balance between power and restraint. She didn't win the national title. She placed 3rd, which was an incredible achievement. But as she stood on the podium with her bronze medal, she realized something profound. Winning wasn't the point anymore. The point was showing up fully as herself, competing with honor, and inspiring others to do the same. After the ceremony, reporters asked what was next for her. "I'm starting college in the fall," Aisha said. "Studying education. I want to teach." "Will you keep competing?" one reporter asked. Aisha smiled. "I'll keep training. But my real competition now is helping others find their own strength. That's the fight I want to dedicate my life to." Back at Brookridge High, Sensei Harris had taken over a classroom after school hours, teaching martial arts to a new generation of students. The program had become part of the official curriculum, with the school board recognizing the value of teaching discipline and character alongside academics. On the wall of that classroom hung a photo, Aisha at the regional championship, her father's arms around her, both of them grinning with joy. Below it, a plaque read, "The Brookridge Dojo of Balance, founded in honor of Aisha Coleman, who taught us that strength is silence until it speaks." The first class included students of all backgrounds, rich and poor, popular and invisible, confident and scared. Among them was a small freshman named Emma Taylor, the girl with glasses who'd once asked Aisha how to stay balanced when people were mean. Emma tied her white belt around her waist, took her stance on the mat, and listened as Sensei Harris repeated the words Aisha had once said to her. Remember, martial arts isn't about being tough. It's about being balanced. In here, he tapped his chest, and out here, he gestured widely. In the back of the room, a photo montage Mia had created showed the journey, images of protests and assemblies, of the mural being painted, of students standing together. The final image was Aisha's graduation speech, and below it, her words were written. True victory isn't about defeating enemies. It's about refusing to become one. Across town, Brittany Hale worked at the community center where she'd attended therapy. She'd volunteered there all summer, helping younger kids with homework and organizing activities. It wasn't glamorous work, and it certainly wasn't the life she'd imagined. But for the first time, she felt like she was contributing something meaningful. Chad Miller had enrolled in community college and joined their wrestling team. He kept his head down, worked hard, and slowly rebuilt his reputation through actions rather than words. He'd never be the person he was before. That version of himself was gone. But maybe that was okay. Maybe becoming someone new was the only path to redemption. As for Aisha, she spent the rest of her summer teaching at Sensei Harris's dojo, preparing for college, and answering messages from students across the country who'd heard her story. Each message reminded her that her journey had never been just about her. One evening, as she led a class through a basic kata, she looked around at the faces watching her. Children of every background, all learning that strength came from discipline, that power came from balance, and that the greatest victory was mastering yourself. Her father watched from the doorway, his eyes misty with pride. Her mother sat on a bench, sketching the scene in a notebook. Sensei Harris supervised from the corner, nodding approval. And Aisha understood, finally and completely, that she'd never been just a poor girl who didn't belong. She'd always been exactly who she needed to be. A fighter not with fists, but with dignity. A champion not of tournaments, but of character. A teacher not of techniques, but of truth. The dojo banner waved gently in the evening breeze coming through the open windows. On it, the motto Aisha had helped design: balance, discipline, respect. She smiled, adjusted a student's stance, and continued teaching. The tsabistisoe, work of building strength, real strength, was never finished. But that was okay. She was ready for it. She had always been ready. When the world tries to make you small, will you shrink to fit their expectations, or will you stand tall and teach them what real strength looks like? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about courage, discipline, and the power of never giving up.